Okay. Well. Hello, everyone. Good morning if you're in the US, or good evening if you're in Hong Kong, where I actually am right now. We're joined with Steve Torino, who's the Principal Solutions Architect for CyberSaint. And we're very, very happy to have him with us because he's going to talk to us about everything that CyberSaint are up to. So Steve, over to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
All right, thanks, Henry, and thanks everyone for joining. So topic of today's webinar is how the Global 500 are transforming cyber risk management in the digital age.
Fantastic.
So first, just a little bit about CyberSaint. CyberSaint is recognized by Gartner as a purpose-built integrated risk management solution. You can see some of our existing customers and partners over here to the left. What that means really is CyberSaint's mission is to be the system of record for the risk and compliance business function. So if you think across other business processes within an organization, most of them have a system of record. If you're sales, you have CRM. If you're finance, you have general ledger. Cyber has really lacked that historically, and that's really where we come in to leverage the technologies and tech stack that exists within a customer's environment, bring that all together in the context of controls and in cyber risk assessments, and to roll all that up into meaningful and actionable information for executive stakeholders. So a little bit about the why. We're here today to talk about digital transformation. It's never been more pertinent of a topic than in 2020. We've seen massive amounts of digital transformation over the last year brought out by necessity, right? So really rapid adoption of cloud technologies has been one of the main methods by which we've done that. But as we look forward to the future, there's a lot of interest from executives at increasing our digital transformation and leveraging some of the technologies that are forthcoming to enable us to do that. So things like blockchain, 5G, AI, machine learning offer really large opportunities for organizations, but also changes our sort of threat landscape, right? So this is where CISOs and security teams can come in and be enablers for digital transformation, right? Being brought in from the beginning as we're engaging in conversations around the type of transformation processes we want to undertake, and being a partner from the beginning and understanding how that affects our risk posture. So this slide here, this is from Gartner, taking a look at stakeholders across organizations and where they're prioritizing digital transformation. And so the ones in blue here, these are really the buckets where CyberSaint kind of fits in. Obviously, you can see from the highest level of 45% increasing investment, even down to the lowest level in software development or upgrades of 20%. This is a big priority for organizations, and CyberSaint is really well poised to help support that process from a cyber risk management perspective. A lot of the organizations that we're in conversations with are viewing digital transformation as a competitive advantage. So whether that's bringing new products or services to the marketplace based on the technologies that are available today, whether it's changing processes to look for sort of improvements where we can find them. This is just becoming a really big topic that a lot of folks are talking about. And CyberSaint is really in kind of the weeds here in a lot of ways of helping organizations to, from a risk and compliance perspective, manage some of this digital transformation in a way that enables them to understand where their risk posture lies and also take actionable steps towards improving that. So if we take a look here at kind of the maturity process, starting over at the left here with organizations that are just kind of getting started on their security journey, you might be looking at smaller companies that are starting out with a compliance-focused requirement. Maybe they have a SOC 2 requirement, a PCI, HIPAA requirement, whatever it may be. But as we move more towards the right in this slide here, we're getting more towards defined, managed, optimized, and level 6, what we're calling dynamic in our maturity journey. This is where we need to have a tool that enables us to be able to do that. And that's really what CyberSaint provides from the get-go. It's really easy technology to stand up, and we enable organizations to kind of be met where they're at with their compliance journey and to assist them in maturing over time. And this slide here really has, these are terms that we put together, but it has analogies to whether it's a NIST implementation tiers or whether it's a CMMC maturity levels, this concept of going from sort of a more ad hoc process to really kind of documenting and getting processes and procedures in place, and then moving towards a more integrated perspective where risk is actually part of a core value of an organization. And in order to do that, you really do need some type of a system to enable us to understand where we're at, where we've been, and where we want to go. So just to focus a little bit on that level 6 here dynamic, this is where CyberSaint really stands out. Although we have customers in all of these different 6 levels, where we're receiving a lot of attention has to do with level 6, where we're taking a look at a true continuous assessment methodology here. We're having risk-aware and cyber-aware culture. We're integrating risk with our strategic decisions. Governance is being driven by management, which I think is a really important part of it here, in order to enable management to even be able to govern our risk. We have to provide them with actionable information so that they understand where we stand. Providing that visibility to the board and compliance and risk management is actually an expectation, sort of a core value of the organization. So to jump into a little bit about how we do that, just a quick case study here. So this is from one of our Fortune 50 enterprise customers in the manufacturing space. There's support from the highest levels of the organization. We have sponsorship from not just the CISO, but also the CIO, the CEO, president, board of directors, because they've identified a problem. They're understanding that although risk and compliance is a dynamic process that changes consistently as assets change, threats and vulnerabilities change, the value of the data that's on those assets changes, et cetera, the processes by which they're managing that have been the same for decades. And they're looking at this as an opportunity to come in, take a look at the process of how we've been managing this business function, look for additional efficiencies, and also understanding based on some of the realities of 2020 with headcount being reduced in a lot of cases. It's really a perfect time to take a look at what type of technologies we might be able to put in place to enable us to move forward on our journey and just take kind of a high level look at how we're managing this process. So in this organization, 70% of GRC headcount was either going to be cut or repurposed away. Now, some of that due to some of the economic challenges around 2020, but also there's just a lot of digital transformation that's going on. And so as we are repurposing, and this has been, I think, typical for cyber historically, is a lot of times we repurpose people for that, whether it's IT staff or other folks who have a full-time day job, and then they have some amount of responsibility for, scoring certain controls, maybe providing certain artifacts or supporting evidence in support of that. So that's kind of a little bit of the context here. But also understanding that they've made significant investments in this case, RSA Archer. And we see this kind of across the board with our enterprise customers, that they've invested tons of time and tons of money in legacy GRC platforms that in a lot of ways are really being asked to solve a problem that they weren't designed to solve from the get-go. And that's where CyberSaint really kind of comes in, because in some cases we can replace these technologies, but in a lot of cases, particularly with enterprise accounts where we are understanding that their teams are already trained up on this, they've invested a lot of time and money into it, we can actually sit on top of that and integrate with it, pull information in, and present it in a way that's a little bit more meaningful. So what this organization that we're talking about here was looking at is from year one, 25% automation, which ultimately results in about a $3 million cost savings for them. And then by year 3, they're looking towards up to 90% automation. We'll talk a little bit about how we do that, but that will result in up to $20 million savings, which is pretty substantial. So this slide here is really a use case of how we approach this automation process. So what we're looking at here is a variety of different telemetry sources, bringing them in many ways analogous to what a SIM system would do for a SOC or indicator of compromise perspective. But instead of taking those telemetry sources and looking for indicators of compromise, we're looking for fields within those that relate to risk, right? So we can take in that raw data, associate that with controls across any number of assessments, because as we all know in enterprise organizations, we have a lot of different regulatory requirements around security and privacy that we have to assess ourselves against. So there's huge efficiencies gained just in that by itself. But we pull that information in, we can associate that with controls, but then we roll those controls up to what NIST 830 would call like tier 1 and tier 2 risks, more strategic and business process oriented risks, which gives us that viewpoint from an executive perspective to just log in and look really quickly at where we stand, where we've come over time, and where we may want to kind of put some additional resources to bettering our security posture over time. In this example here, if we break down some of the functional areas that this case study customer of ours is looking to automate, we're looking from 80 to 90% efficiencies to be gained over 3 years. So, we have a variety of different tech tools here, utilities and things of that nature. From a SOC perspective, they're looking to get up to 90% automation. Same thing for application security and identity and access management, and then leveraging some of the native cloud services out of solutions like GCP, AWS, Azure, to bring up to an 80% efficiency from a cloud security perspective. So at the end of the day, what this does, some of what we just talked about is kind of from the practitioner perspective, the users who would, in a manual process, be in the system, manually scoring controls and adding supporting evidence. Through a commitment to automation, we can start to get those things done automatically. But what we're showing here on this slide here is really the other side of the coin here. This is the executive viewpoint and how those stakeholders can interact with the system. So it's similar to a way where an executive might be able to log into a general ledger system and take a look at balances and projections for the future. We enable that for the cyber function here through a series of governance dashboards. We provide automated reports. So because everything's happening in one system of record, all the information is being entered in one place, and then we can then automatically generate reports that are updated in real time. We have some AI-backed remediation steps as well that we could provide for our customers to try to identify some of the areas where we may want to prioritize first to get kind of bigger bang for the buck. And then that historical audit reporting as well. And down in these bullet points here, you see some of the functional areas where we make a big impact, whether it's IT and cyber governance, return on security investment. There's a few different ways that we can project that. Some of it has to do with how we're scoring controls and associating more like quantitative measures around solution cost or financial impact. And then we can also roll that up to risk. Regulatory compliance, obviously, cyber risk management, audit remediation, and then also third party and supply chain. And the great part is in an integrated risk management tool, this is all included out of the box. These aren't modules that you have to buy separately. The system is all integrated. Everything's talking to each other. So we're able to provide that all just out of the box functionality. So the journey from the manual processes, like what does that actually get us? Well, obviously from that case study, we're taking a look at how it's saving us a lot of time, efficiencies, saving us a lot of money. But what it means in practicality is that we're able to dynamically manage our risks and increase our program maturity. And to do that really in real time, right? Especially as we're ingesting different sources of data and applying that in real time, we're seeing how our risks are changing. And able to kind of respond to those things as needed. And that enables us to continuously prioritize and refine, adding more automation over time. This is another thing around the automation. That too is a maturity process, even for large organizations, right? This hasn't really been done before. So if the first thing we do is we identify some of the low-hanging fruit. Where can we get really great results from certain technologies, like maybe vulnerability scanners is a great example. Some of the native cloud services are a good example, identity and access management. And then over time, we continue to add additional tools and technologies, map those to controls both statically and dynamically, and really increase our efficiencies with that as well. What that all enables is our ability to track tangible and measured impacts and returns on investment with a balance of qualitative and quantitative data. So what I mean by that is at a certain maturity level, qualitative, just identifying likelihood and impact may be good enough for certain areas of the business. Other areas we may be wanting to get a little bit more quantitative and understand the dollars and cents that are associated with this stuff. And as we talked about, CyberSaint really is able to support different levels of maturity. So whether we're just at kind of the likelihood and impact stage, or whether we're wanting to get into more quantitative measurements of this risk, we can support both of those. And ultimately what it does is it helps us optimize our human capital, automate processes, and propose high return on security investment solutions. So we've been receiving a lot of attention in the marketplace based on this automation that we have. And we've actually been named a cool vendor by Gartner for 2020, which is something we're really proud of. So wanting to call that out here. Just a quick quote from Gartner. At an industry level, there is currently a lack of best practice for mapping real-time telemetry into control environments, but CyberSaint is making more progress than most, especially compared to the IT risk management vendors. And then we'll wrap it up here with just another quick case study. This is from one of our customers, Duke Energy, that came to us with really a massive OT and IT digital transformation project. So being a large energy company with over 6,000 sites and plants, they had a need to standardize all that into a continuous trackable system where they'd be able to provide that information to different stakeholders across the organization, present that information in a variety of different ways, and ultimately measure risk and security posture in real time. So we partnered with Ernst & Young on this one to bring them a solution where we designed a tailored assessment methodology, developed a reliable posture and readiness baseline, and implemented a continuously improving program. And what the outcome of that was automation for their assessments, enabling their compliance with NIST-CSF and NERC-CIP at over 6,000 sites, providing that visibility to the board, real-time insight into cybersecurity risk and posture, as well as return on security investment, and continuous improvement of their cyber posture. So this is something that we're very involved in with a lot of enterprise customers, and we're always happy to enter into conversations with organizations who are interested in getting started on an automation journey in terms of their risk process here. So Henry, back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate it. It was a really good presentation. Nice kind of overview. So I do have a couple of questions. In fact, I have 4 questions. So the first one is, where do you see the biggest threat in 2021 with regards to digital transformation?
I think the biggest threats, and this is my opinion, is in the unknown. So we have a variety of different technologies that are being rolled out that are extremely promising, and companies are very eager to implement them because they can bring additional products and services to market and can at the end of the day, make a lot more money based on these things. So if we look at 5G, for example, some of the infrastructure that's associated with it, here in the US, we've, at least temporarily, I think, banned certain technology providers from certain countries in order to try and protect some of our national security interests around it. There's questions, I think, with that in terms of how well that's going to actually solve the problem, because we have companies like Huawei that are able to go into countries in Eastern Europe and Latin America and provide the infrastructure for 5G with grants or long-term loans backed by the government of China. So this infrastructure is kind of out there, and in an interconnected world, I think there's a lot of questions around that. So for me, I think the unknown is probably the biggest threat.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting about the Huawei situation, because it's quite political, because in the UK there's a big issue with it. There was a sort of back and forth for politics. Next question is, with regards to your automation process and your social telemetry, I'm wondering, can you just share how I'm assuming that it constantly evolves, right? So the question I have is, how do you get the sources for that? I mean, do you get sort of different AI sources or open source intelligence? Am I correct with assuming that data is constantly being updated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad to talk about this. So let me start by saying that there's sort of a myth, I think, around automation, that automation exists, you just click a button and it's on. That's not the case, right? That's never going to be the case, because tech stacks differ, and there's an amount of this risk and compliance stuff that is art more than science. So you may have a tenable feed that you think maps and gives you credit for full credit on certain vulnerability management controls, and I may think that it only gives me partial credit for those controls, right? So we have to have the ability to not only take a look at the tech stack in general, identify some of the sources where it's going to actually make an impact, because we can, to the extent that there are APIs and data feeds available for different telemetry sources, we can take anything, but let's take a look at what's actually going to save people time. If it's something that you're only going in once a year and manually uploading the results of it, I'm not sure that that's a great candidate for automation. But if it's something that you're doing on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, every Patch Tuesday, you can name what it is. Those are really good candidates, I think, for automation. So what we want to do is take a look at that telemetry source, and then I use the analogy of a SIM, right? For some of my background is in security operations. So in that case, we tune that stuff, right? We look for what are the fields in there that make a difference in terms of indicators of compromise, for example, and what do we need to be alerted on? Well, we're kind of doing the same thing, just with a risk focus. So we can take those same technologies, but we want to identify A, the fields in there that impact risk and compliance, and B, what it means. You know, what is the requirement to increase a score or to decrease a score on a control. So there's a little bit of a collaborative effort here, I think, that goes into mapping those things out.
Okay, cool. Do you compete? What other kind of GRC platforms would you say that CyberSaint competes with?
Yeah, another good question. We do compete with GRC. I would say our biggest competitor is spreadsheets, to be honest, because most companies, even who have invested in GRCs, are doing their assessments on spreadsheets because it's difficult to do it in GRC platforms. We have certain cases where we've been able to replace GRC. I don't think that that's necessarily our main approach, especially in the enterprise space where we understand that there's processes built around those. We can coexist. We can live on top of it. We can ingest with those just like we would with any other source of telemetry, pulling information in and potentially pushing information out to those systems as well. Okay, cool.
And on that subject, which industries does CyberSaint service the most?
Yeah, well, where we see a lot of interest, I guess, as you can imagine, would be any industry where there's a lot of regulatory requirements, right? So we've had from whether it's manufacturing, defense industrial base, oil and gas, power utilities, those are some of the big ones for us. We really look at it in a lot of ways from a framework perspective. So we have something like 60 frameworks generally available in system, you know, from day one when customers log in, and we're constantly adding to that. Many of those are regulatory frameworks. Some of those are, you know, the ones where you can sort of choose whether you want to be bound by it or not, like, you know, Center for Internet Security and NIST-CSF and things of that nature.
Cool, interesting. That's it. That's kind of exhausted my questions. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us and give us a really excellent overview of CyberSaint.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Cool. Take care. We'll talk soon.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye. Okay.
That was great.